Hey there, welcome back to the channel. So far, as we've begun curating our playlist of relaxing classical music, I've been pretty unfair to vocalists. I've previously argued that vocal music is not necessarily the most relaxing music we can listen to, and while there is some truth to that, it would be foolish of me to disregard an entire category of classical music. In fact, a lot of vocal music is some of the most beautiful music that's ever been written. So today I am giving vocalists equal footing, and we are going over the top 5 most relaxing pieces of choral music. Hey everyone, my name is Matthew, and welcome to Calm Insomniac, where we're a community of people trying to get a better night's sleep. If you enjoy learning about sleep health, sleep tips, and relaxing classical music, then please like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for notifications. Like I said, I've previously argued that vocal music is not necessarily the most relaxing classical music that we can listen to, and here's why. When we hear spoken or sung language, that adds a layer of complexity for our brain. First, our brain has to see if we understand the language. In other words, is the language our native language? From there, our brain has to do further analysis to see if we comprehend what is being said. This all happens in a split second, but is a little more work than we want our brain to be doing when we're trying to relax and fall asleep. But now let me explain why vocal music can, in fact, be relaxing. Language adds context to music that instrumental music can't often provide. This context gives us a clear picture of what the music is about, and in the case of a lot of vocal music, that context is religious or sacred. Sacred music is often calming to people, and when we listen to purely instrumental music, we often attribute meaning to the music, but in the case of sacred vocal music, it is very obvious what the music is about, and this is often a source of spiritual comfort. Additionally, the sound of the human voice is naturally comforting to us. A choir, much like a string orchestra, has a very homogeneous sound, and human voices blend extremely well together. If you can remember back to when you were a child, the sound of your mother's voice was naturally soothing to you, and that's a long-lasting impression on us. And finally, throughout history, culture, art, and religion, singing has been considered alluring. This alluring quality can be for good, such as angels singing, or for bad, such as the Greek sirens singing songs that lured sailors to their death. So I hope I've made a good argument for why vocal music can in fact be relaxing, and maybe I've redeemed myself a little bit. With that in mind, let's remind ourselves of the 4 main criteria that can make classical music relaxing. And that is, we want the music to be instrumental only, though not in this case, repetitive, in a simple form, and have a consistent, calm tempo. If you want to learn more about these criteria, then I suggest you watch this video right over here. Additionally, for this list, I decided to focus on purely vocal a cappella choir music. In other words, there are no instrumental accompaniment to go along with the voices. This is simply to limit my choices, but also the incredible amount of choral orchestral literature deserves its own list. Alright, with all of that out of the way, let's finally get into the top 5 most relaxing pieces of choral music. These are in no particular order. Let's start with number 1, which is Sleep by Whitacre. I'm sure it doesn't surprise anyone that a piece titled Sleep would end up on this list. Sleep premiered in 2000 and was commissioned to be in memory of the commissioner's parents. The text was originally from a Robert Frost poem, but due to copyright issues this needed to be changed, and the current text was written by poet Charles Anthony Silvestri. Whitacre is a living American composer who is most known for his choral works. Sleep is arguably his most famous work, and if you were in a high school choir after the year 2000, there's a good chance that you performed this piece at some point. When describing this piece, as well as the other pieces on this list, I want to focus on its musical texture. In this case, I will define texture simply as meaning the number of lines that happen in a piece of music. There are 2 textures I want to define today: homophonic and polyphonic. Homophonic music refers to music that is written for multiple lines, but all of those lines move together at the same time. Polyphonic music, on the other hand, is music written for multiple lines that all move independently of one another. In the case of this piece and the others on this list, sleep is predominantly homophonic, and this makes the texture of the music incredibly simple and easy to listen to. Additionally, Whitacre's harmonies are very simple, and he uses dissonance sparingly, and dissonance is when notes clash against each other. The second piece on our list is Pärt's Da Pacem Domine. Arvo Pärt is an Estonian composer who is one of the most performed living composers in the world. He is known for having invented his own compositional techniques, and much of his music is influenced by Gregorian chant, and he is most known for his sacred vocal works. Also, as a quick side note, I'm pretty sure I'm not 100% accurately pronouncing his last name. The Estonian pronunciation is pretty hard for certain English speakers to say, but I'm doing my best. Da Pacem Domine was written in 2004 and was written in memory of the victims of the Madrid train bombing. The Latin text is based on a 6th or 7th century hymn, which in turn is based on biblical verses. One of the hallmarks of this piece and Pärt's music in general is his minimalism. Minimalist music takes the smallest amount of material possible and develops it slowly over a long period of time. So in this piece, Pärt develops the music one line at a time, one syllable at a time. So there is no real definable melody. Instead, we get a soundscape, and this creates a really shimmery or angelic effect to the music. The piece is only about 5 minutes long, but for the entire 5 minutes, you are really immersed in this sound, and it's a really cool thing to listen to. The third piece on our list is Rachmaninoff's Bògòroditse Devo from All Night Vigil. Sergei Rachmaninoff was a Russian composer of the late Romantic era. His most famous piece is arguably his second piano concerto, but all of his large-scale orchestral works are considered standard repertoire. All Night Vigil, often incorrectly known as Vespers, premiered in 1915 and is often considered Rachmaninoff's greatest masterpiece. The piece is based on the texts of the Russian Orthodox all-night vigil ceremony, and the text of the music is sung in Russian. Bògòroditse Devo is the Hail Mary, it's the 6th movement of the work, and is based on a chant. This piece is possibly the most rhythmically involved of any piece on this list. However, it is still predominantly homophonic and sometimes biphonic, so there are 2 different lines. And since the music is based on a chant, it has a very plaintive quality to it, and it's no surprise that it sounds like a hymn that would be sung in church. In the middle of the movement, it climaxes at a very loud moment where the entire choir is singing fortissimo. And depending on the recording you're listening to, this might not sound the most relaxing. I think a lot of that has to do with the sound of the Russian language. It's a little more aggressive sounding compared to the Romance languages such as French or Italian. But that doesn't mean that it isn't necessarily still relaxing in a way. If you think of this moment as the heavens are opening up, that's a much better way to approach this moment in the music. The fourth piece on our list is the first Requiem Aeternam from Howells' Requiem. Herbert Howells was a British composer and organist who was most known for his Anglican church music. It's important to know that much of his life, music, and inspiration revolved around the tragedy of his son dying of polio at 9 years old. Howells' Requiem was composed between 1932 to 1933, however it was unknown and unpublished until 1980. The Requiem doesn't follow the traditional liturgical structure of a Requiem. Instead, it consists of 6 short movements composed of hymns and other Latin texts that were compiled by the composer. This piece contains 2 Requiem Aeternam, but I'm only addressing the first one. This movement has a few polyphonic moments, but is still mostly homophonic. What is most fascinating about this movement is its harmonic complexity. Compared to all the other pieces on this list, the harmonies are much more complex and advanced, particularly for its time. Instead of using just regular major or minor chords, he instead used extended chords, which we would hear as jazz chords. And keep in mind that when he wrote this in 1932 to 1933, this is still the early stages of jazz. Because these are extended chords and complex harmonies, you might think that these wouldn't sound very relaxing because there are too many notes that are clashing against each other. However, the opposite is actually true, and a lot of it has to deal with context, like we discussed earlier. These dissonances have tension, but it's a good kind of tension, and when the tension is resolved, it seems much more satisfying to us. And overall, the piece is very serene and something that you can really close your eyes and truthfully fall asleep to, but in a good way, not from boredom. So this music won't seem weird or avant-garde in any way, and if you've ever heard a jazz ballad, you will hear some similarities to this piece. And the fifth and final piece on our list is Palestrina's Kyrie from the Pope Marcellus Mass. Palestrina was an Italian composer of the Renaissance era and is one of the most influential composers of the Renaissance. His development of polyphonic music is considered the culmination of the Renaissance and is one of the most important developments in all of Western music. The Pope Marcellus Mass was composed around 1562 and is Palestrina's most famous work. In fact, this work and this particular movement we're discussing is almost always studied by students in music history classes. The piece as a whole is unique because it is not based on any pre-existing themes, which was a common practice at the time. Instead, it is all original music. The piece does, however, follow the traditional structure of a Renaissance Mass, and the Kyrie, which we're discussing, is the opening of the Mass. This is by far the oldest piece of music I've shared with you on any of these lists, but I thought it was important to show you an early example of sacred music compared to the more recent music that we've discussed on this list. One of the hallmarks of Palestrina's music is its clarity and simplicity, especially as it relates to the text. At this time in music history, there was a big debate among sacred music as to whether the clarity of the text or the complexity of the music should be favored, and they ultimately argued that clarity of the text was most important. So Palestrina's music is simple and easy to understand the text, even though it is polyphonic and there are multiple things happening. In the Kyrie, we mostly have imitative or a call and response pattern, so there are several things happening, but you will always understand the text, and that was very important at this time. And even though this piece is nearing 500 years old, I think you'll notice how Palestrina's style has continued to influence composers who write sacred music throughout time. Alright, those are the top 5 most relaxing pieces of choral music, and I'm really glad that I was able to do this list. I love vocal music, I love choral orchestral music, I like opera, and truthfully, vocalists are some of my favorite musicians to collaborate with. But I am not a vocalist, and if you are one, then you should definitely let me know in the comments below what pieces did I miss and what are some of your favorite relaxing pieces of choral music. I'm sure there's a ton of literature out there that I don't know yet, and you would be a great resource for me. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you learned something. Don't forget to like, subscribe, follow me on Facebook and Pinterest, check out my website, and join my email list. All of those links are down below. If you enjoyed this video and want to learn more about relaxing classical music, then I suggest you check out this playlist right over here. And if you want to see one of my recent videos where I discuss how long bacteria survives on our bedding, then check out this video down over here. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.